I have been aware of your work, but recently when I pulled up IMDb and to see your portfolio, like working with Ron Howard, George Lucas, Robert Zemeckis, Spielberg, Gene Roddenberry, some of the biggest names in the career that you've had. That's incredible.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate. I got in at just the right time.
Well, speaking of that, why don't you tell us how you got into art directing and I think into visual effects too, from at least some of the credits that showed on IMDb. Just
Okay.
talking about that.
hmm Well, I kind of my career started. I started as a car designer, and I worked at General Motors back in Detroit. I went to Art Center College, and that's where I was studying to be a car designer.
Sure.
And so out of school, I got a job at General Motors and went to Detroit. Worked at Detroit for roughly almost 2 years, and then I kind of got a little frustrated living back there.
Hmm.
So a friend of mine had called me from California. He was working at Atari Games in Sunnyvale. And
Right.
so he said, why don't you come out for an interview? At least you'll get a nice trip to California. So I went out and they gave me a job. So I started at Atari Games.
Oh,
And then
cool.
I was at Atari Games for about 3 years. And the company itself was kind of starting to go downhill. But I really liked the Bay Area. So I knew of Industrial Light and Magic. I had the books from Joe Johnston and Neil Orotis with beautiful illustrations, and I knew that they were somewhere in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So I looked in the phone book and found their phone number, and I got their address, and I sent up a resume, which wasn't much at the time, and a set of slide sheets, like 20 slides. That's how far back this goes. It's 1985. So I sent those up and I didn't hear anything for a long time. And I thought, well, I can't stay at Atari. What am I going to do? Am I going to become a car designer again? So I started pursuing that. And about 8 months into it, I got a call from Lucasfilm, and
Mhm.
Nilo wanted me to come up and meet him. So I went up and met Nilo, and he liked me. He liked the work that I had shown in the slides, and he said, "Well, I can offer you a job, but I can only offer you 1 month worth of time, and I need you to start tomorrow." And I went, "Oh my gosh, I'm still working at Atari. What am I going to do?" So I went into Atari and I said, "I'm sorry, this is my last day today. I'm going to Lucasfilm to work on a project," and that was Howard the Duck.
Right. George Lucas's project. Yes.
Yeah. So I get up there, and I had never done anything in film before. I mean, the things that I had shown Nilo, I had one like 5-panel storyboard, and he liked that for some reason. And so he gives me the script to Howard the Duck, and he goes, "Okay, can you start storyboarding it?" I look at him, and I'm like, "What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing here." So he had other obligations, and so I was kind of left on my own to try to figure this out. So weeks go by, and I'd go home with bad headaches and tense, and I just couldn't get it together. And so after a month, he goes, "John, I really like you. I know you can do this work, but for some reason you can't do it. So I have to let you go." So I got let go after 1 month. So now that, oh, now what am I going to do? I found a part-time job at a friend from Stanford was starting a toy company, and he asked me to come down and help them design some toys for kids.
Right.
So about 3 months into that, I'm sorry for the long story. But 3 months
No,
into
no,
that,
this is good.
3 months into that, Nilo calls back. He goes, "John, I have more time to meet with you and work with you, and I want you to come back." So I went back and I started working on Star Trek 4, the one with the whales. They have to save the
Yeah.
whales, go back
Yeah.
in time. So I started there, and that's what got me into ILM on a more permanent basis. So from Star Trek 4 I then went on to work on Willow, and then I went to work on, let's see, Tucker.
Batteries not included.
Batteries not included, a little bit on that.
Yeah.
And then Tucker, and then Cocoon: The Return. That was in 1988.
Yeah.
But before, right after I finished working on Willow, which was 1986, Patty Blau, one of the producers, came into the art department and said, we don't have a script yet, but Bob Z wants to do a sequel to Back to the Future. All we know is we're going 30 years in the future. There's hoverboards. And you come up with some ideas on what that's all about. So I created a bunch of drawings for that in 1986. And then the project kind of disappeared. And Bob went on to work on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And so in 1988, it started to circle back up again in the art department. So I started doing some more drawings. And then Rick Carter came up, the production designer, came up from LA with, let's see, Ken Ralston was in the room, Steve Starkey, a few other people, and myself. And Rick really liked the work that I was doing from 1986. And he said, can we borrow John for just a couple weeks to come down to LA and work on Back to the Future with us? And ILM agreed. And the 3 weeks turned into 4 or 5 months. And so I got to design the hoverboards and costumes. I worked with Joanna Johnston and Hill Valley 2015. That was my area, was to work on 2015 and help visualize the future. So Rick and I got along great. And after the Back to the Future 2 and 3 were done, I went back to ILM, worked on Rocketeer. And then that summer, that was a fun movie. Yeah, that was really a fun one to work on.
Great movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Had a nice tight story. Well, I love the comic book. When the graphic novel came out, Dave Stevens' graphic novel, I just loved it.
Yeah.
I love that whole era. So,
Go on.
So now I'm getting into Jurassic Park. So the summer of 91, I finish up working on Rocketeer. I'm dating Joanna Johnston, the costume designer from Back to the Future. She and I had been dating for a while, and she's up in Montana working on Far and Away. So I go up to visit. So I go up to visit her in Montana, and I don't know how he found me, but I got a phone call from Rick Carter, because I didn't tell anybody really I was going up there. Rick Carter calls me and says, "Hey, we're doing this film about the book Jurassic Park. Read the book, and I want you to come down and work on the project." And so I didn't even know what's Jurassic Park. What is that? And so he goes, well, you got to read the book and then come on down. When can you start? And this was in July. And I said, I was just taking some time off. Can I just have a little bit of time off? He says, okay. When can you start? So I said, how about August? He goes, okay. All right, August. That sounds fine. So that's what got me into Jurassic Park, summer 1999, or pardon me, 1991.
91.
And then,
I'm sorry, go on. I just have so many things in my head, but I let you finish. I'm just so excited.
So I get down to the art department, and Rick, he and Nilo have been such great friends and so generous in their belief in me and what I can possibly bring to a project. And so Rick, like the first day I come in, he goes, we've already done a lot of work on the film, but I want you to look through what we've done, read the script, and then just give me whatever take you have on this. You know, whatever it is, I don't care what it is. It's vehicles, it's props, it's storyboard sequence, whatever you want to do, just come up with stuff and then we'll, see where it goes. So that's what he gave me. He gave me that broad lane to drive in, and I just started taking stabs at all different areas. I mean, there's so much to be inspired by the script that I was just, doing whatever came to mind. And he liked what I was doing. And then I got to introduce Spielberg, and it was great. It was one of the greatest experiences of my career, for sure.
I bet. I mean, you're telling me all these names of the films, and then when you said hoverboard, I'm like, you designed a hoverboard? Like that's the thought process in my head, right? And I mean, it's such an iconic thing. Um, and then, just hearing about, it's funny you mentioned Joanna Johnson. She still works with Spielberg. We actually reached out to her agent
Oh
yesterday,
yeah,
and I think, yeah, I think she's really occupied with some projects and stuff, so that didn't
Su-
work out.
super talented woman, hard working woman. She was great. I still keep in contact with her.
Yeah. Um, and I can't get over the fact that just looking at your resume, right? Like I'm just like looking at IMDb right now, like all the way leading up to, now, like pretty much 90% of the films that are in there are some of my favorite films. Like,
Oh,
movies that I grew up with, like AI, Ants, obviously the names that you mentioned, Contact. I was just talking to Don Burgess, the DP with Robert Zemeckis,
yeah.
on What Lies Beneath, Contact, and Castaway. And it is just so amazing that the names that you mentioned obviously brought back a lot of memories, but just kind of reminded me how great films used to be,
Mm,
in the 80s and then the 90s. Like that was those 2 decades. 70s was too for sure, but 80s and 90s were like, it was like an era of cinema just taking a giant leap, but in a positive direction.
yeah,
And Rocketeer, like it's like technically a superhero movie, but it's not. It's such a good film. Like it has elements of Indiana Jones in it. Obviously Joe
yeah.
Johnston worked on Raiders, and a big Spielberg collaborator. But you know, working on Jurassic Park, when you started, let's just break it down with the first film. Um,
Hmm.
Jurassic Park, what was your responsibility as an art director? Like, if you can run down the process, for people who are listening, even for me. I mean, I am a bit familiar with it because I'm in the industry, but at the same time, just how that process takes place, and then kind of talk about Jurassic Park at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, that was really my first time as being an art director. When I was at ILM, I was an effects art director. So,
Right.
you just focused on a very tight area. But on Jurassic, I don't know if it's the same process with each production designer. All I can say is working with Rick, like I was saying earlier, he just gave me such a wide lane to explore. Do you want to do storyboards? Take a look at the storyboards we have now. Look at the script. Do you have other ideas? Do you want to bring other ideas into it? Look at the vehicles. What are they going to be driving around in the park in? So, sketch up as a car designer. It's like, okay, I got an opportunity here to design cars for not, and it's for film. So, um, it was just the process was really wide open. I can't say there's a real structure to it. It was
Okay.
just,
Okay.
like you said, whatever comes to mind when you read it, start visualizing it. And that's the fun part about being a storyboard artist, is that you're really the first person or people. David Lowery was another storyboard artist on the film. Tom Cranham was one, Marty Klein. But, we're the first people who really get to visualize what the script is.
Yeah.
And so then everybody can react to those visuals. Oh, would they really have a wide shot here? Would they really have a close up here? Would they really touch the angle here? It's all those things that just, you're inspired by the words, and the words create these images on paper. You know,
Sure. And
and
how much involved were you, not necessarily conceptualizing, but to a certain degree, being responsible for the looks of the dinosaur, if anything, like in the art direction stage? Or was that something that was not your department that you were working on?
yeah, I wasn't involved. I was involved in the stuff that got destroyed by the dinosaurs.
Okay, like what?
Well, like the visitor center, like the cars,
Okay,
um, props, people.
okay.
But the dinosaurs themselves, I mean, that was all Crash McCreary and Stan Winston's crew,
Right.
which was
So
phenomenal.
let's talk about what you did, right? Like honestly, like the way it's so funny. I somehow I stumbled upon Facebook with this. There are actually people who actually make a point of doing this. That people actually go to location sites of films where they were shot. And I saw a picture of where the Welcome Center was, the visitor center, the big giant building.
Mhm.
Somebody actually went there and took a picture of that spot, which is like completely flat land now, to, to compare it to. I mean, I'm like, that's good for you that you have time and resources to do that. That's awesome. But it just
Yeah.
tells you the amount of fandom there is. So the, you know, when you were designing the visitor center, what were some of the things that, if there was any struggle in trying to come up with it, or that obviously it goes to Spielberg, or he will come back with feedback, any kind of story that you can share in that department, in that realm?
Yeah. For the visitor center, um, Jim Teagarden, he was a co-art director on the film. He he and Rick were really laying out that space pretty thoroughly by the time I got on board. I think they started
Okay.
on the film in 1990. So for me, um, again, Rick said, "This is what we have, but what do you want to do?" And so I wanted to create a really dramatic entrance to the visitor center. So I had drawings with big statues of dinosaurs out in front of it. And I had
Yeah.
very elaborate things going on. But, time and budget, schedule, that all plays into what actually
Sure.
gets put into the final piece, right? So, what my contribution was really for that entrance was putting the relief of the dinosaur skeleton above the door, and then the door itself, which had this kind of egg motif with these radiating lines. And Rick really liked that because it was like a rebirth symbol for him. And it got played again in different areas within the visitor center, more
Yeah.
subtly. But that was a main motif that really resonated with him. And that's how that got into the film. Aside from that, the rotunda area, um,
Mm.
there was some exploration that was done in that section too before I got there. But Rick had a very religious thought in mind. He was thinking it was the Dome of the Rock in
Okay.
Jerusalem because he had
Right.
visited that, and he wanted the rotunda to kind of resonate with that same type of thought. Is that this is a very sacred area that we've entered into, and these dinosaurs are coming to life, coming up out of that rock. So he said, this is where the budget kind of thing ate into it. They were going to do it. It was the whole rotunda was going to be completely finished at one point, but the budget made Rick and Steven think of a different way to deal with this, saying that, well, maybe this isn't complete yet. Maybe there's still areas of the park that are still under construction, and this could be one of them. And so we presented ideas of what that would look like with tarps and scaffolding and different elements in there. And when we showed that to Stephen, he liked the opportunity there. He said, "Oh, okay, I can see this. Yeah, the kids they can come down. They'll come down through the ceiling and they'll get on this scaffolding, and then they'll go over to here, and then they'll go over here, and then the raptors will come in, and then they're going to get trapped here." And his mind is just like a projector the whole time. He's thinking moment by moment, beat by beat, what's going to happen, and then the T-Rex is going to come in at the last second. It was all very exciting. So um, that was a moment where the budget really helped determine a whole different layer to the ending of that film.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it wasn't in the original, if I'm not mistaken, at least from some of the interviews I've seen of Spielberg, he said that the plan wasn't to have T-Rex in the end. And then he realized that if he doesn't bring the T-Rex back, because up until that point, T-Rex came obviously for the giant introduction shot, like that whole scene with Sam Neill,
Yeah.
and the kids, and then in the middle when he's eating the Dilophosaurus, it's a Dilophosaurus
Hmm.
dinosaurs. So he wanted to bring that in the end, and that was kind of like on a spur of the moment thing and I think it was what you design in that film, the visitor center, like that is such an iconic place. The last shot of T-Rex with the banner going down and the
Yeah.
T-Rex rolling, and you see the entire space. So it must feel really proud to be, you must have pride to be part of that something
Oh,
gigantic. I mean, Jurassic Park is such a fun. I mean, even to this day, it has way better effects than any other films that are being made today.
yeah. It was again a tremendous experience. And then, for the things that I do, I'm really working with, paper. This is pre-Photoshop. So
Yeah.
I'm working with paper, magic markers, and pencil. And so to see that go from a piece of paper on your desk, sitting in the theater, and you're seeing it on the big screen with the audience responding to it all, you're going, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a real it's really it's I kind of you gotta get goosebumps from it because 30 years later we're talking about it. And to this day, I'm getting emails from people who are showing me they want to paint the Ford Explorer, to look like Jurassic Park, or their Jeep, or they ask me questions about the film. And it's just, it's incredible. There's so much luck and timing. If I hadn't met Rick, if I hadn't met Nilo, I don't know what I would have been doing as a career. They've taken me to a whole different space that I could have
Well,
ever imagined.
you can, I mean, we can have an art discussion about this. Luck kind of comes, but it can go away if you don't work hard, right? I mean, you can't just put everything on luck,
No,
I feel, because everybody gets, well, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people get opportunities. Sometimes we don't grasp them because we're afraid to grasp them, but sometimes we grab them, but we don't put in our time and effort so
yeah,
that, we can continue. So, I mean, it's not an easy thing. And I'm not just saying this, like I talk about this to my kids, to other people, even I tell myself that it's it's okay. I think getting a break is a somewhat easier thing as opposed to maintaining it, like being consistent and staying there. Because there's a lot
yeah,
of people that come and go, right? Like whether they're actors, directors, effects, visual artists, but just to
yeah.
stay there at that level is not an easy thing. So I don't think you should call it all in luck. I mean, obviously it has to do with your working hard as well. Um,
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, you work hard at it, but there's a lot of timing involved,
true, true.
you know.
I agree with the timing, yeah. Do you believe in fate? Was it meant to be?
Wow. Um, I would have never imagined, if I could have gone back in time and said, you know what, in 30 years I'm gonna have worked on this and this and this in the film industry, I would have said, there's no
Pretty
way.
crazy. Yeah.
Because when I started Art Center, before I started Art Center, my dad got me introduced to Art Center. He was on
Yeah.
a he was on a business trip from New Jersey to California, and he
Right.
met some people, and the people that he spoke to said, "Oh, your kid likes to draw cars. Well, there's a school over here that teaches people how to design cars." So that's how I got into Art Center. I thought I was just going to draw race cars my whole life. Live in New Jersey, but
But yeah, but I think I believe yes, luck is there, timing is there, working hard is there, but it's also about, I know this is going to sound very cliche and like film like, but I believe in destiny.
hmm,
Um, I'll give you my example. I mean, I'm nowhere near at your caliber what you were doing. When I was in high school, when I was in grade 11, I used to take subway from home to school. It was like literally like a 40-minute subway ride. And you know how in Subway they have movie posters and
yeah.
advertisements, and so I would wait for the subway and I saw this gigantic logo and it said June 11th, 1993. And it was Jurassic Park. And I had no idea what it was. And then I saw that again at a bookstore when I went to see my dentist, and I'm like, what the hell is Jurassic Park? And it just kind of kept building this curiosity. And when the film came out, I never got to go see it in movie theater, but the day it came out, I remember holding a newspaper, which I still have. I said, this is what I want to do. And I
Mm,
waited 16 months for the VHS to come out, and I saw every Spielberg movie produced, directed, and I was like completely into it. So, I mean, if I had not seen that logo, who knows what would have
yeah,
happened.
I know. It's amazing. What put you in that subway at that time to see that poster, right?
It's yeah, it's time, and I think it's also, you're if you're meant to do something, I think you get signals from the universe, and it's about grasping it or not grasping it. That's what I think, but I'm not
Yeah,
an expert.
well, I tell my kids too, I said, you know what? You just have to keep putting yourself out there. If you're interested in something, put yourself out there, because the worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no. And then
Yeah.
you go to somebody else. You just keep pushing and finding different avenues and different outlets to pursue what you're really interested in. At some point it's going to land for you.
If
Just
you
be
keep at
positive.
it, it does. It does. It
Yeah.
does. What are your kids into what you're doing, or they're in a completely different field?
No, they're not taking this film path. No, my daughter wants to be a speech pathologist, work with children.
That's good.
And then my son just started working for Boeing up in Seattle area as a design engineer.
Fantastic.
But they both do artwork very well. It's more like a hobby, like, do that.
Genetics.
Yeah. But they
Uh,
really enjoy doing it.
yeah, and that's the key part, right? Like enjoying what you're doing, because like you said, being a car designer and then working at Atari, you weren't really finding that joy and happiness.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing if you can get joy and happiness and get good a salary at the same time. I mean,
Yeah.
you hit a jackpot.
I work in
Going
video
back,
games. Sorry, I was just going to say I work in video games now, but I don't play any video games.
okay, okay, well there you go.
But
That's the cycle, right? Loop all the way back.
yeah, the process is the same. I'm given a task to design, oh, what's this building look like? What's this car? What's this character? What's this environment look like? Create what it looks like. But
Right.
as far as playing, I'd rather be outside doing things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm sure. And in terms of Jurassic Park, or just in general, like when you're given the task, and I kind of think you talked about it, but if you remember any specific example, it doesn't have to be Jurassic Park, any film. When you're given the task to come up with something, right? Like you have to visualize, that's like the first step in what people see on the giant screen, as you said.
Mhm.
Was there any time where you had kind of like a writer's block or like an artist block where you just felt like this is like whatever you drew, either for yourself it wasn't worth it, like you were not happy with it, or whoever the director was, they probably said that this is not what I want, and you have to go back and start all over again.
Thinking. Um, I can't say I've had any type of writer's block per se. Um, Usually when sometimes I know there are other people, concept artists and artists that I know who get intimidated by a blank sheet of paper.
Mm,
But for me, I look at it and I just start coming up with something. And sometimes I'll go, well, that's not really what I'm looking for. And so I'll kind of start over a little bit, but usually I just kind of go with the first idea
the
and
gut feeling.
I'll get it. Yeah. Yeah. My gut tells me at least finish this off, show it to them. Maybe they like it. Maybe they won't. If they don't like it, then yeah, I'll start from scratch again. But knock on wood, I mean, I was fortunate on both Back to the Future and Jurassic Park, was that a lot of the first ideas that were coming out were ones that made it to the final film.
That's
Um,
amazing.
I think if there's any struggles I had, what was I worked with I worked with a production designer on Starship Trooper,
Okay.
and and he was a pleasant enough guy, but for some reason, he and I, there's so much chemistry that has to go on
Yeah.
these films because the projects are so long. The chemistry just wasn't really there for me to. I got to design a lot of stuff for the film, but it
Mhm.
was more of a struggle to get those things pushed through. Where storyboarding, it was a little easier to just bang out the sequences, and again, you kind of, when I was storyboarding, it was like having a bit of a projector in my head, and I'd read the words and I'd start drawing up, okay, we need a wide shot here, okay, I want to do a close up here, I want to do another close up followed by, and really kind of work through the whole sequence. And I won't even stop until I get through the whole sequence, and then I'll look back through it again, and I might pick out a couple things that I feel don't work. Oh, maybe I should have done this shot here differently or that shot there differently.
Sure.
But
And how long does it take you to maybe like do one sketch on a piece of paper, whatever that is, whether it's a visitor center or anything else?
well, it depends on what's involved. Like a visitor center is going to take longer than the Ford
Yeah.
Explorer because there's more elements to balance and to figure out. But let's say a visitor center sketch, that's probably done in a day, less than a
Okay.
day. Full color, pencil, everything, markers. So that's the thing is too, is you have to work quick because there's so much that has to get done. So you have to be fast at what you're doing, what you're creating. There's not a lot of time. It's different designing for the real world than it is to design for the film world,
Yeah.
because the film, the camera's usually moving, or the shot that you've spent days on creating is going to be on film for 4 seconds or 5 seconds. So the things you have to design have to read very quickly. Otherwise you can't. In the real world, you get to go, oh yeah, look at the radius on this, and look at the finish on that, and I think that's a trap that a lot of designers for film kind of fall into with Photoshop. They get really seduced by everything that you can do with it. And I'll pick out the Transformers movies. I look at those robots, those characters, and I can't tell head from toes. I mean, there's no focal point for the design of the character. I'm just seeing shiny metal bits all over the place. It's like, it's too busy. I think
Yeah.
there's room for simplicity. And that's why like the new Blade Runner that came out, great shots, open screen, 1, 2, 3 elements per shot, basically is like, okay, I can really digest the design of it, the overall spirit of it. I really enjoyed that film because of the way that was photographed.
Well, Roger Deakins, I think, did the cinematography of it.
Working with him on Rango, what a genius. Oh my gosh. So what a great guy. What a lovely man.
And he's still at it, he's still
I
going.
know.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Gore Verbinski was another director who was great to work for.
The Rango, he did Rango, right?
Rango.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had such a clear vision for what he wanted to do. And all those reference points were ones that I've always admired. So it was a great synchronicity we had, I thought.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you were saying about, from an art director, visual art director point of view, like, we have something in a frame and it's not busy, right? And I think in the same way from a directing standpoint, when you are not, I'm a really big fan of old way of filmmaking. When I say old, I even mean the 80s and the 90s, where you have like a wide shot or a medium shot where you see so much happening, right, in a frame, as opposed to cutting back and forth or super close up. Sometimes you need close ups if you're trying to drive the emotion. But in the old ways, I mean, Zemeckis has done this very well, Francis Ford Coppola, Spielberg. Whenever you're trying to draw into an emotion, you just slowly dolly in, right? Like on that
Yeah.
character. but most of the time it's just I feel that I'm there, at least for me, when I see a wider frame, because there's depth in it. There's so much going on in this side of the frame. Not that it's busy, it's just done such aesthetically that you just feel like you're there. And I think
Yeah.
it's the same thing what you're saying in terms of art direction. It's just it does sometimes become too jam-packed. And I never looked at a Transformers that way. I've only liked the first one. I didn't really like anything beyond that. But
Hmm.
you're right, in terms of robots, especially like Optimus Prime, there was just so much metal there, and other and all the action sequences. There's so much going on that you can't figure out who's who and what's what.
Yeah, if you want to connect with the characters on the screen, you have to have some type of focal point to
Yeah,
allow that to happen.
yeah.
And for
Jim
them, I
Henson was
just
really good at that.
who?
Jim Henson, like,
Oh
you know,
yeah,
if you look at Labyrinth, you know, I don't know if you remember that movie
oh
from way
yeah,
back.
oh yeah,
But it was just I mean, there was so much detail, but at the same time, there was just focal points of each of the characters that were there.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And now that you have done Jurassic Park, right? The film comes out, it
Mhm.
just blows up expectations. Well, I shouldn't say it blows up expectations, but I think it just goes in that realm where, you know, no film has gone before.
Yeah.
And then how soon were you because 93 Jurassic Park came out, 97 Lost World came out, and I know Spielberg got busy with DreamWorks in between in 93, 94.
Yeah.
How soon did you know there was going to be a sequel, and how soon did you start working on it?
I started, let's see, I started working on that in, I think it was early, it was either late 94 or early 95. And I can't remember if Spielberg's office called me or if Rick called me. All I remember is going down and seeing Steven again. And we were looking at the Mercedes. And he wanted me to the Mercedes SUV, which was brand
Mhm.
new and
Yeah,
it
at
was
the
just being
time.
released.
Yeah,
So he wanted me to get involved with designing, you know, retrofitting and creating the look for the different factions in that film. The Mercedes, the hunters, what were they called? The hunters and the gatherers, I think is what
yeah, yeah,
we called them, at least in the art department. So designing what the hunters' vehicles would look like and their outfits, and what the gatherers' outfits and vehicles would look like. That big long bus that they had, RV, and then the Jeeps, and then the Mercedes. So, you know, I didn't have the length of being on the project like on the first one,
sure.
but it was still rewarding. Any opportunity I had to work with Steven again was great. Yeah.
Well, the RV sequence, I mean, for me in that entire film, that is the best scene, if you want to call it, or sequence in the film. Is just the what goes on in it, like and the way obviously it has a lot to do with the way the RV is designed internally. Like, you know, you have to know where the T-Rex is going to come from and look inside, and then when it goes over the cliff, how all
Yeah.
that sort of transpires. So you were an integral part of designing that RV?
Yeah. Yeah. The RV and yeah, all the vehicles in the film. Yeah. But
So what, sorry, go on.
no, I was going to say again, my time was limited. I was really living. I wasn't living in LA working on that when I was working out of my house in San Francisco. So my involvement for the final fit and finish of everything wasn't up to me. You know, I was giving initial inspirations for what the exterior and interior would
Sure,
look like, and then it was handed over to the art department down there to
sure.
finish it all off, create it.
But aside, whether it's this film or any other film, does the director, you know, come up to you and say, okay, this, let's just take World, for example, not Jurassic World, sorry, The Lost World, for example.
Mhm.
Stephen would come to you and obviously based on the script, this is what the scene is, and this is what's going to happen. And are you more so taking Spielberg's thought process into consideration more than maybe what's in the script, or is it the same? Or you're just kind of going in with your own blank interpretation of what it could like depending on the scene?
Oh, it's kind of a mix of all those elements, you know, because the working relationship with myself and Rick and Steven was, I thought it was a really solid relationship that we had. And so I was given a lot of latitude for coming up with what that would look like. And so it was really feeding off what was going to happen in the script. And then it was more about the script and my personal tastes were and thoughts would be on that particular vehicle.
Mm.
It's, I always try to put myself into the situation when I'm reading a script. What would I do if such and such happened here and there? Like on the first Jurassic Park, there was an early storyboard before I got involved where Sam Neill and Jeff Goldblum are in the one vehicle and the kids are in the other vehicle, and the T-Rex comes out, right? And goes after them. And in the original storyboards, Sam Neill's character and Jeff Goldblum, they just sit there and kind of watch it all take place. I'm thinking, if it were me and there was two kids in danger over there, I'd find something, anything to distract the T-Rex away from the kids and get them away.
Right.
So I thought, well, maybe in the car, maybe in the back of the car, they'd have some type of flare equipment or flashlights or something back there. So I thought, well, maybe, one of them would go back there, grab a flare, get out of the car and kind of distract the T-Rex and pull them away from the kids. So that was a contribution that I made for that scene.
That's a huge contribution because that's such an iconic scene. When he says Ian freeze and then, and the whole action unfolds right after that.
Yeah.
That's really cool to know. I mean, that's what I find. Again, I'm kind of repeating myself, like hoverboard and the visitor center entrance, and then that scene that you just explained. Those are just some iconic things. And if you ever go on social media, I mean, I discovered this recently because I've been doing some research and stuff, and there's so many groups on Goonies, Back to the Future, Spielberg, and the amount of Close Encounters and the amount of collection these people have, it's just mind-boggling that they literally have this gigantic. And then another one on Instagram, actually, I'll probably send you this. I've discovered 4 or 5 guys who live in Europe, and they literally are in competition with each other in these really realistic looking, gigantic T-Rex or different scenes from the film, even the one that you're talking about. And I'm like, that must have cost like 30, 40, $50,000.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
It's crazy. I just discovered this 3 months ago. There's people who have giant collections now. I mean, it's just insane. It will worth something down the road, but
I remember at the end of Jurassic Park, the whole interior of the visitor center and the lab, and they had all those carved reliefs everywhere. And I'm thinking, oh, they're just going to throw all this stuff into the dumpster. It's all going to get trashed. None of it was saved before Prop Store was reselling everything. So I called a couple people and said, do you have room there's a big column here with a giant dinosaur relief carved in it. It's fantastic. Do you want it? Oh, I don't know where I'm going to put this. I don't know. And I didn't have any space. I'm living in an apartment in San Francisco. So I didn't think to keep it for myself, and go through the steps of finding storage space and getting it shipped from LA to the Bay Area. So it's just a shame that so much of this incredible artwork that people put in weeks and weeks and weeks of effort into it just got thrown into dumpsters and trashed. And that's just one film. Think of all the other films too.
I thought they always preserved that. Like nowadays, there's so many documentaries that come out.
Nowadays, yeah. But back in the early 90s and late 80s, that wasn't the case. At least that wasn't my experience. I didn't know of anybody that was saving that stuff. Yeah,
That's
small
such a
props.
treasure. Sorry?
Small props would get saved, like a handheld sword or a
Yeah.
lightsaber handle or things like
Yeah.
that.
That's that's so sad because I mean, you look at the films now, like, for example, um, the books that are coming out, I don't know if you've had a chance to read them by James Mottram, The Ultimate Visual History Guide to Jurassic Park. I don't know if you had a chance to
Oh
take a look
yeah.
at it.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a great book. And then going it through that, and I was like, skimming through it and reading through it, and the amount of stories, obviously, stories are something that are always preserved. You can't throw them in the garbage. But even all the stuff, you're right, because in that book there is less visuals as opposed to the Jurassic World trilogy book. I mean, there's this immense amount of stuff in there, pull
Yeah.
out sketches, and that's
Yeah.
really sad that they did that. But hopefully they're able to preserve this. I mean, now we're living in the digital age. We need it way more than ever before, just to have that
Yeah.
kind of tangible, object
Exactly.
in our
Yeah.
hands.
When I was at ILM back in the 80s, it was always an adventure and so exciting to walk into the model shop where you're seeing the Enterprise, and it's 9 feet
Nice.
long and it's got all the lights and wires and everything inside of it that they're pulling it apart and fixing things, or the battery's not included, robots being built by Greg Jean. And oh my gosh, it was just fantastic to go. And everybody in there was so excited about the work that they were doing, and the passion they put into it. And they're always so friendly. Oh, let me show you what I'm doing over here, John. They take you over to this desk and that desk, and oh, it was fantastic. But now you'd walk through there and you'd be looking at a monitor here and you look at a monitor there. Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, it's not the
Not
same
quite,
anymore.
not quite the same. Yeah,
Yeah, but that's just the way the world
yeah.
we live in now.
And now you've got AI coming on board. Where's
Yep.
that gonna Where's that gonna take
You
us?
know, it's so fascinating to me that when Spielberg made AI, the one that you were part of course, um, that world where robots are discriminated and, a robot trying to be a real boy. Obviously, James Cameron painted a similar picture. His picture was a lot scarier than what we are thinking that where it's going to head. But I also think what Spielberg did in AI or Stanley Kubrick, I think we're like probably 50, 60 years away from that. The way
Yeah,
technology is taking a giant leap. I mean, think about it. 27 years ago, more or less, so let's say 30 years ago, internet came out, right? And to public. But the amount of leap it has made in the last 10, 15 years, especially with social media, is insane. Like it's
yeah,
just crazy. Like my dad, he's in his 80s, and whenever I show him something like a piano on a phone or FaceTime, and he's just, I mean, he knows this, but he's just still so amazed by it
yeah,
because obviously, he grew up in the ages of, when you send a letter, it goes like 3 months to get to overseas and whatnot. But yeah, you're right. AI is gonna, it's scary. It really is. And we're just
yeah.
really depending on it. It's really, really scary.
Yeah. The resolution of the images has increased dramatically just in the past 8 months. It's phenomenal. I'm waiting to see what happens when AI gets introduced to the music industry and somebody types in a prompt that is Beyonce, Hank Williams, Nine Inch Nails, James Brown. Give me a song. What's that going to sound like? It's going to be crazy.
It is. I mean, you can take right now, there are sites available where you can take someone's visual and the sample of their audio and make something out of it. I actually saw an interview on Instagram of Bill Gates, and it was about this whole COVID thing. And,
Mhm.
I don't like talking about politics, but let's just assume on the podcast because it was about like how what Bill Gates is doing is this and it shouldn't be this. And that video was literally an interview of Bill Gates where he's being questioned and put on the edge. And for about 10 seconds in, I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. But it got so scary because you would never hear those kind of questions on mainstream media. It was all
Oh,
fake, but it
oh,
was so real. It was genuinely real. That was so crazy. And I'm imagining now, tomorrow, if I don't like somebody or somebody doesn't like me and we have act, you can just put someone's stuff online and make them cancel.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's gonna be a problem because it's going to create so much paranoia and insecurity in people. Like, did I read what I just read? Was that real or was that created? Did I
Yeah.
just see that? Was that for real or was that created?
You
Did I
know,
just hear something?
in terms of what you do, I will give you an example. If you go on Facebook, somebody did this and it would just blew my mind. There's a Goonies page, like, fans get together and they talk about their collectible and stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody told, I don't know which AI software it was, to create images of the Goonies characters. And it was like 3D renderings of all the characters in an animation format with the floating ships in the sky. And it was so gorgeous. Like I'm not gonna lie, it looked beautiful. But at the same time, I'm like, there goes all the art directors and the concept artist job. Like someone just pulled this off in a matter of minutes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We've had discussions with that. I work for a like video game company in town up here, and we've had the discussions about AI and what it's going to do to upset the people who are studying to become concept artists and art directors. And I'm wondering at art schools, how are they going to handle that? If are students actually going to go to these art schools anymore, or will they just go to Mid Journey and type in a couple prompts and come up with pretty, some pretty amazing artwork for nothing,
Yeah,
for $30 a month?
yeah, yeah. It's insane.
It's a big can of worms. But I'm glad I'm not starting my career at this point.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, I'm sure you've heard of Fiverr and Upwork, right? Is it Upwork?
No, Fiverr and
Fiverr
Upwork.
is like basically a platform where you can anybody can make a job posting. Like, I need social media animation, I need a logo design, I need a post, like anything you imagine, right? So there's people who have their own profile, and these people, majority of them live in other countries, not in Western world, where the conversion of dollar is a lot more better than, someone working here. I have seen people cutting a pizza commercial in a very professional manner. $25. A-
Wow.
And I'm like, how do you compete with that? Right? Like,
Yeah,
how the hell do you compete with $25? That's like not even hourly wage, for
that's
some people.
nuts. And what's it?
So
The website's called Fiverr.
Fiverr, Fiverr, and then there's another one called Upwork.
I'll look those
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. I mean, it can be beneficial to a certain extent, but imagine now they're gonna compete with AI. Now that's going to be crazier.
Yeah,
20 think about it that way. Like, it's just getting, narrower and narrower, and it's insane. But at the same time, the flip side to that, the way I look at it, then the value of what we do is going to go much higher, I
mhm,
think. In terms of like, well, there's not many storyboard artists, or there are not so many writers around, or let's just
yeah,
jack up our price. You know what I mean? If that makes
yeah,
any sense.
yeah. And how did you get into film business, getting involved with films and
Well,
entertainment?
sure. So part of the story was, I mean, I'm going to try to summarize it as much as possible because it's kind of quite long. Um, After Jurassic Park came out, um, I told you that I saw all the Spielberg films and everything, and
Yeah,
I really wanted to go to film school, but at the time, you have to have a portfolio, and there was no such thing as camcorders. At least there were, but they were not very accessible. So
yeah,
ended up doing IT, which was like, the beginning of the internet world at the time. And I took this course on HTML, how to make websites. And I just for the kicks made a Spielberg page because I was in that zone of loving films and everything.
Yeah.
And I failed the course, and but it was a requirement in my first year of university. So I took it again and I failed it again. And by that time, my site had become a little bit bigger than I intended. So I showed it to my professor, and he passed me. Like after I begged him, like this look at the practical work that I've done.
Hmm.
And then that site became so big. That's where it turned into a DreamWorks fan site. Like I had over 100,000 hits per month, and this is way pre-social media age. And during that time, I was doing my IT degree. I was making small corporate videos, sometimes this event, that event, and that just sort of fled into more work and more stuff. And then in 2013, I started my first feature documentary, which came out in 2017. And then I've done I've directed three feature documentaries. I've produced four, and
Fantastic.
now I'm slowly getting into writing. And because my main objective always has been narrative, like where I can control the story, or
Yeah.
stuff like Zemeckis has made, stuff that Spielberg has made, like the stuff that we all grew up with.
Right.
So that has been my journey, and still at it. And
Mhm.
I'm trying to just take it one day at a time.
So the documentaries, so they all revolve around the film industry and entertainment, or are they different subjects?
No, completely different.
Mm.
One of them is a social political documentary about a small village. It's called Only 78. It's about an interracial gay couple, American gay couple that moves to Nova Scotia, eastern part of Canada, and
Mhm.
they discover that the village is under threat from seawall breaking apart, and each level of Canadian government doesn't take ownership, so they carry out an advocacy and trying to save the community. And is it worth saving with 78 people who are like above 60 years of age? Um,
Wow.
and then the last two are extremely more, they're very international, but they're more human rights based.
Uh-huh.
One of them is called Citizen of Moria. It's
Mhm.
about an Afghan filmmaker who comes under threat from Taliban, and he
Ooh.
floods Afghanistan without saying goodbye to his pregnant wife and his kids. And he ends up in Europe's worst refugee camp, and he starts documenting there. And then I kind of join him, and we co-directed it. And then simultaneously, I was directing a film called In Search of My Sister, which is
Mhm.
about an American Uyghur activist whose sister has been taken by the Chinese Communist Party.
Ooh.
And we shot that in 13 countries. We're traveling the world trying to create awareness and find clues to her whereabouts. So we simultaneously we released them. They've been through festival screenings and stuff. Just earlier this year or last year we released them, and now just developing some more stuff and working on that.
Wow. Intense,
Yeah,
intense subject matter. Wow.
intense and very intense. And I
Yeah.
and going through post production during COVID, it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, are you based in San Francisco?
No, I'm up in Central Oregon in a small town called Bend.
I know Bend. I love Oregon. I
Really?
love Oregon. Portland is one of my favorite cities in the world, if anything.
I used to
And
work at
I
Nike and lived in downtown Portland back in the 90s. And it's changed quite a bit. I don't know when the last time you were there, but it's changed a lot.
I was there in 2002 and then 2007. I haven't been there
Um,
since then.
you won't
Um,
recognize the Pearl. You remember the Pearl District?
yep,
You won't recognize it now. It's all
I'm sure.
skyscrapers,
I'm sure.
$1 million condos. It's high roller area in there now. A lot of galleries, a lot of shops. And then sadly, 2 blocks away, homeless camps everywhere. You know,
Yeah, that's a
it's
big
really,
thing. That's a big thing in Portland, or in
oh my
Oregon.
gosh. Yeah.
Um, but is Bend, my wife and I drove from San Francisco to Portland back in 2007. Would Bend have come in the way? Like, is it on the route, or would
No,
it be more on the east?
no, because you would have gone up Route 5 all the way, right? Up to
Yeah,
from San Francisco to Portland. So we're 3 hours southeast of
so you're on the
Portland.
east. Okay.
So if you were to look at the state, I mean, we're almost dead center in the middle of it.
Got it.
It's pretty. There's, some amazing mountains just 40 minutes away,
Yeah.
snow capped, and it's a great place for being outdoors.
I think, have you seen Harry and the Hendersons?
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That took place in Oregon, didn't it?
Yeah,
About
I
that.
actually spoke to the director, William Deere, a couple of months back, and
Uh-huh.
they filmed it mostly in, I know they filmed it in Oregon, but I would like to say they filmed most of it in Bend or the surrounding parts of Bend.
Wow. I'll have to look into that. That's
Yeah, that's a
fascinating.
great film. That's a great film.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
I've watched.
I haven't seen that
You
one in a
haven't
long
seen it?
time. No, I've seen it, but it's been ages since I've seen that one.
You know, I saw it again like 3 months ago, and I was like, "Holy crap, this is so timeless! It's so amazing. It's such an amazing film. It's such an amazing
Didn't
film."
was
But
it John Lithgow? Was he Harry?
no, that was John Lithgow and Melinda Dillon, who was in Close Encounters. They were the leading actors. Harry was played by Kevin Peterhall, who
Okay.
who also did Predator in the same year.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah, it's two complete opposite
Yeah.
roles, and I think he passed away a few years after that. I don't know
Um,
how, but I mean, those are some iconic roles to play in the same year too.
Absolutely. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Those are big
Well,
ones.
great. What are you working on now? Any projects that you can talk about?
Again, I'm working for a video game studio here in town.
Okay.
All I can say is like an action adventure title. Um,
Okay.
we're still at the beginning of it, so it's going to be a while before it's released. But the studio's done some good work. The previous game that they released was called a game called Days Gone, and it's like a survivalist type game.
Okay.
But it's been critically acclaimed, and it's been out for what, almost 3 years now, and it just keeps getting more and more attention. So it's a
What
good
is it
one.
called again?
Days Gone.
It's gone. I wonder if my son knows about it. I used to be into games, but not anymore.
Mhm.
Just,
Yeah. And my
and you
son
can.
plays a lot of different games. He's all over the place, so he doesn't just stick with one. He'll go for the indie titles, and then he'll go for the big titles, and he goes all over.
Probably Roblox. I mean, Roblox is more for kids,
He did
but there's a lot of
Minecraft.
stuff. Minecraft, yeah,
Mine,
that's
yeah,
huge. That's huge.
yeah.
Any films down the horizon that you would want to go back there, or you're happy where you are, or
Yeah, well, I can't say I'm a fan of I'll call them the leotard movies, the superhero ones. I can't,
thank you.
I can't get into those.
And I can't either.
I just
I can't.
can't. Um, so and that's the majority of what comes out nowadays. So, no.
Well, I do think
I'd like to get on a film project again, but you know what I did? I worked on the latest, it hasn't come out yet. It's the new Spider-Verse movie. I got to do some design work for that. So
that
I'm
looks
looking forward to seeing what that looks like, because the first Spider-Verse movie was fantastic.
amazing. You know, I don't watch superhero films. If you want to call Christopher Nolan trilogy superhero films, which I don't, that's the only one that I've seen, and the first original Spider-Man that came up by Sam Raimi.
Yes.
But when my kids wanted to go see Spider-Verse, I'm like, I don't care for superhero movies, right? Like I didn't want to go. And when I went, I was quite shocked because
Yeah.
it's not the same thing as everything else, right? Um,
Right.
and
It
it's
made
just
all
that
the other animated films look old, like instantly.
it did. And I don't know if you've seen the new Puss in Boots film, Last Wish
I
by
saw the
DreamWorks.
trailers for it. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so their style of the animation in there is quite borrowed from Spider-Verse. Like it
Yeah.
has the painting kind of a feel, like you can feel the background, like as if it's like a texture that you're touching.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the new way. There's going to be a trend now because people I think are burned out by superhero movies, even like, as great Pixar films as are, that's people need change. I think people are
Yeah.
hungry for change, and and that's what made 90s so great. I think because people were looking for something new, and that's when the independent cinema kicked in, like Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, and
Yeah,
and all that stuff. So I hope that's a sign of things to come.
yeah, yeah, me too.
Great.
Yeah, it's funny
Um,
for the different effects films I worked on. Still, some of my favorite films are non-effects films. Like To
there you
Kill a
go.
Mockingbird, Citizen Kane. Um, uh, what was the one,
Have you
Sound
seen?
of Metal, that came out a couple of years ago with
Yeah,
the drummer who goes deaf. Oh, beautiful
amazing.
movies.
Have you
Beautiful.
seen 12 Angry Men?
Oh yeah, 12 Angry Men. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great one.
that's I think that's like a film school 101. Like you cannot make a film like that with the
Yeah,
way the performances and the script and in one freaking room, and it doesn't get bored at all. Like
right.
there's nothing else happening in that film.
Yeah. On the
But
Waterfront's another one. I mean, there's so many, but
yeah.
The Searchers, anyway.
Yeah, no, this has been great, John. If you're up for it, as kind of time progresses, I would love to do series of episodes with you, maybe on Back to the Future, maybe on Willow, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, that sounds like fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
So did I. Thank you so much for joining in, man. I wish I could talk to you for longer, but just the time is one of those
Well,
things that we have to go by.
if you ever get up near Bend, come on over.
I will sure let you know if that happens.
That'd be
100%.
great.
Pleasure talking to you, John. Looking forward to talking more.
You too. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye bye.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.